to say offhandedly, think of the people, think of the jocks that you went to high school with. They're not mature people. They never have been. And if you want to talk about either college age or fresh out of college age person, it's maybe 23, 24 years old in the NFL, they're still not a very mentally developed person. Let's be very blunt about that. I'm not saying if they fuck up, it's right, but back to your point, if somebody works on themselves and, everybody makes mistakes, of course, if it's like something like sexual assault, that's unforgivable. You do need to pay your dues, or not pay your dues, but you know what I mean? Like help.
I agree with the phrase "pay your dues," but I also think that I'm sorry to cut you off there because I should add a more full formed thought, but I think it's important to remember that I'm just being stupid. Like people change, like simple as that. You know what I mean?
You are right. If you're 40 years old and you fucked up once when you were 22, it shouldn't ruin your life when you're 40. Obviously, as long as it's not something that,
as long as you're not Bill Cosby, you've been drugging and raping women for all these years, But
if you got in a bad fucking fight with your girlfriend when you were 22 years old, and some shit went down, you may not be proud of that, but you probably as long as you're a normal person who can feel guilty about your actions, when you're 40 years old, that shouldn't take down your life.
Right. And it's like the thing that it's such a difficult conversation to get around, because as we're having it, I feel this sense of a potential listener going well, why are you guys trying to, set up this forgiveness? What did you do when you were younger? What happened? What happened? I've alluded to this story before, and I'm going to actually come out and tell the story because it's appropriate for this moment. When I was 21 years old, I was becoming a manager of McDonald's, and I wasn't very happy about that. I'd worked at McDonald's in my teenage years, and I expected, I guess, more out of my life, and I had grown to kind of hate McDonald's and become just immature with looking where I wanted to put my blame out to, right? And there was personal issues that I was going through, and there's all sorts of things that, because of my immaturity, it resulted in the event that I ended up burglarizing a McDonald's that I work for. I didn't actually go into the building and take the money myself, but I had keys that I gave to somebody else, and they went and did that. And what I can say is I'm actually, and there's going to be 2 points here, and I'll start with the first point of, had I not gotten in trouble for that, had I not been held accountable, had people not basically seen what a despicable person I had become because of all these varying factors, I would have just slowly gotten worse. And I actually am thankful for being caught. I'm thankful for the time that I had to spend in jail, because it was literally I can put a stick in the ground, if we were to look at it visually of a timeline of my life and say this is where I got really bad into really bad habits, into being a terrible person. And then it changed, and I started thinking about things differently. But being that I have that in my past, that I am a criminal, that I have been to jail for criminal activity, even though I'm not a felon, because I was able to work out a deal. I could have been a felon, but I'm not. So knowing that I have this thing in my past, right, it makes me constantly wonder, should my voice ever take influence at what point is that going to come back and haunt me? And it makes me wonder, how much should I even try to have a voice, or to be, to present myself in a way as a better person, when I know that our culture today will look back at me, who I was 14, 15 years ago, right, and say, well, you did this then, so we can't trust you now. And then that's where I want to apply that same thinking to, like, not heinous crimes, not rape, not things like that, but like, these are young men, and yes, they're millionaires. Yes, they're built in incredible ways with their bodies, and they look so much more mature than they are. And I would just simply ask people to remember that these are like 23, 24, 25-year-old men, and just, like, give the same leeway that we would want for ourselves is really where I wanted to take that.
Yeah, no, and I do feel that for you specifically, it's a little bit different, but not entirely. Just only because you did your time, you've since learned from it and become a better person because of it.
Well, that was my point. Just quickly here, not to fully cut you off, but that was my point at the start of saying I wanted to make 2 points. That being held accountable actually is the reason that I was able to better myself. So that's what makes it kind of a difficult, it's like a juggling act. Like, I know being held accountable, but being held accountable in the moment is more what I'm talking about.
Right. That is kind of more appropriate, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've never done anything that severe. Of course, my early 20s, I've done and said stupid shit, but I've never, nothing I've never been to jail, thank God. I mean, I think the only thing I should have maybe gone to jail for is all the fucking drinking and driving I did when I was younger, which is a real bonehead move. Don't ever fucking do that, people. But, yeah, you just got to learn to not be a shithead, and that is part of growing up.
Right, yeah, and like, I this is why I had to kind of, and I won't even say the name because I don't want it actually be a part, but like, where I had to like buck up against, like, oh, you're gonna try to like excuse sexual assault or anything like that, is like, no, all I want out of this conversation is for people to understand that, like, these are very young men who have, too much testosterone, too much energy, and like, football does that to them as well. So like, can we also could we also talk about the sport and the environment and the culture of what football is? Like, not only,
I mean, I only played 1 year of football in high school. I played freshman football, and they really wanted me back. Like, I was a decent, I was starting right tackle for the offense, and they really wanted me back. Like, I was good at it, but I couldn't handle that environment and the kind of people that I had to be around all the time, just because I'm not that person. I'm not super competitive in that way. I don't have that jock mentality in me. Excuse me, but not to detract again, but I after what I said before about drinking and driving, it got me thinking something I haven't thought about in a while, but there was one time in my life that, had I not corrected myself in the last minute, I could have easily fucked up many years of my life. So I was 19 or 20, and I was driving home at night, very drunk, and I was coming around this turn in the like Upper Lake Park in Port Washington here.
Right, yeah. The bluff.
Yeah, up by the bluffs. And I wasn't paying attention. I was really fucked up, and I don't know what I was looking at, because I didn't have a smartphone at the time. I must have just been futzing with the radio or something. And at the very last minute, I looked up, and I very, very nearly ran over a little girl. Like I'm serious. Like it was like last minute. I had to jerk the wheel to not run over a child, and I could have fucked up my entire life in that moment. And I think about that to this day. Like what would have, like how much worse my life would have been, because I not only the legal repercussions, but the guilt that I would have lived with if I killed a kid driving home drunk when I was 19.
No kidding.
Man, like I am so thankful that I didn't obviously do that. But that really sticks in my mind of like, it is just so important that you don't drink and drive. Like I will never drink and drive ever again, because of that.
Yeah, I think that's what it comes down to is like, again, now that's a different form of accountability. That's like I just missed out on accountability, but it still rings the same way in your heart of like realizing like how close you came. I'm not trying to talk against accountability, because that in your story, that's your own form of accountability, whether it was legal or not. That's like when you have that like awakening of like, oh shit, yeah, there's real consequences to what I do in this world, and I need to be fucking aware of that. You know, like when I like how I deal with myself and like how I think about my future in the way that it's going to be. So I don't want to say that it's not appropriate to make sure that people have to pay their due. It again is just back to, there does need to be some thought about the age of people, and there also needs to be thought about how long ago the things happened and if the person actually has grown. And I would rather that we spend our time testing people to figure out whether they grew or not, rather than like to be able to like give them a fair shake. Like, okay, you fucked up, but you learned, right? So like if somebody could take your moment there and they see that you did that, and they could figure out a way to psychologically test you and see if you actually felt guilt about it and if your behavior actually changed. Because then, like, what's the point of putting you in jail? You know what I mean? Like, if your behavior has changed, if you have true guilt, just be a productive member of society. That's all we ask. We can't change the past. We can't change what already happened. Like, just be productive from here, you know? And like, I would just like to see our culture move in that direction of, like, we talk about rehabilitation all the time, that we need rehabilitation, not locking people up. Right? So if somebody is rehabilitated, even though they didn't get caught immediately, that doesn't mean that they should still get locked up, because we're not giving enough credit to people, the guilt that you hang around. Because even though you're telling me, like, of course you would have felt 1,000 times more guilty had it happened, it sounds to me like you feel pretty guilty anyways, even though it didn't happen, because you realize that it could have.
I feel guilty that it almost happened. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just think we need to take in general, and just to put a general cap on this topic, is like we need to do a better job of actually looking at the entirety of a scenario, rather than just like, oh, that was bad in the moment. We're talking about forgiving people because of like actual crimes. Whereas like if we're being realistic about today's day and age, people aren't even forgiven for tweets they sent when they were teenagers. Like there was that is
you know, that is the difference that we're trying to distinguish. It's, you can say, of course, we're not trying to be forgiving if someone committed a violent crime towards somebody else in their past. We're talking about if somebody posted something controversial on social media, or you know, like had, you know, just fucked up and did something like you did back in the day with the burglary thing, and you very much regret it, and like you have since grown from that. That is the difference.
Right. I guess this is what I want to say, is that like, even though we were talking about crime, and it should be apparent to the listener that, of course, if we're talking about crime, that then does like kind of umbrella over tweets and, like, if we're saying like something like I did can be excused 15 years down the